Okay, I think we're live. Good morning, Elle Ingalls here. It is a Tuesday, though it feels like a Monday because we had a long weekend with Memorial Day. So I thought I would go back to basics today for you. Just thinking about, what is pressure free? What is the method? How does it work? So that it could get some clarity, especially if you're new to my show. But I often find that after a long weekend or a vacation, we have to hit the reset button. So how do we reset? How do we get back in the game if we're going back to work, working on our businesses if you're an entrepreneur? And pressure free definitely is helpful with that. So, what is the pressure free method? It is an on-the-go stress management method that helps you understand what is causing you to trigger the fight or flight stress response so that you can interrupt it and prevent the release of stress hormones. So, no matter what challenges, pressures, or stressors come your way, you protect you. You stay free of these floods of hormones that are going to seriously affect like every one of your bodily processes. So that's what pressure free means. It doesn't mean that we're not going to have any pressure. Okay. It means that we're going to have a method to deal with that pressure. In fact, you'll probably find yourself taking on more challenges, more pressures. I'm thinking about one of my clients. She does more now than she ever did before. And it's because she has more productive hours in her day. She's not caught up in a lot of the negative thoughts and negativity in general in our world. So it allows her to be free to really use her time effectively. That's one thing we all have the same amount of is time in a day, not time in a lifetime though. And that was one of the premises of my CEO book, The Pressure Free CEO, where I talk about people like Steve Jobs, who died at age 56, so didn't even make it to the average age of someone in our country. That's striking to me. Like, obviously this person was what we might call above average, and yet they don't make it to an average lifespan. So doing a deep dive on the kind of cancer he had, on what was going on, his cancer was of the endocrine cells of the pancreas. And that's interesting because the endocrine system is your hormonal system. And when the first flood of stress hormones, those catecholamines, when they hit those endocrine cells, if there's a malignancy, it causes it to grow very quickly. So gosh, I went deep on that for a moment, but that's just to give an example of, okay, quality of life, length of life. We have a lot of talk about longevity, and I rarely hear anyone talk about longevity and the stress response. I rarely hear anybody talk about quality of life and the stress response. They'll talk about stress, but they won't talk specifically about the stress response. So that's where my work is different than most coaches and most healthcare professionals. They'll talk about stress. They'll tell you to take time off, to slow down. That's nice, but it might not de-stress you because it might make you more anxious if you can't do the work that you want to do in life. I see that oftentimes with people who own their own businesses. They're like, I can't take time off, and if I do, it makes me anxious. So that's the clue right there. With the pressure-free method, there's 3 steps to it. The first is, what do you want? What are your targets? So I use targets, triggers, tools. This is 3 steps. So targets. Sometimes it's not easy to define what we want, to be clear about it, especially if you're in a chronic stress response situation. You're always in the stress cycle because that shuts down the areas of our brain that allow us to even think about our future, to future pace. We're just in the moment trying to protect ourselves. We feel threatened. And so if you feel stuck or threatened, that could be why. If you have difficulty trying to plan for your future, that could be why too. And so targets. Sometimes people just say, "Oh, I need to feel happier. Like I just want a better life." This is not how is this my life, right? That's the question. How is this my life? And so they want something better emotionally and then in all the other facets too. So what are your targets? If you can just come up with one or up to three, like 1 to 3 targets, My targets early on, when I understood what the stress response was doing to me, my target was to stay free, stay up, pressure free all day in my genius zone. Like honestly, to not release those hormones in excess at all. Like that became my number one goal. And then another one was, okay, my mother died of breast cancer, my father had heart disease and diabetes, like the trifecta there. If you look at my genetics, you could say, wow, she's got the trifecta. So what did I want? I want to be healthy. I want to be healthy. I want to have a high quality of life. So those were probably my two big ones to start. I had no idea this would help me get a real deep sleep. Like I usually sleep pretty well, but now I get a much more effective sleep. So there were so many benefits that I didn't even know were possible. I never knew that my skin would heal from my eczema. I never knew I would stop getting stress acne. I never knew that I could go into year after year after year and never even get a cold. Like I didn't know that any of that was possible when I started this. So I didn't have them as targets. So as you think about your targets, I encourage you to really think big and open up to possibility that might feel impossible right now. Like if you have something going on in your life, what is it that you truly want? Like what would you really like to see happen or change? Just kind of open up to that and brainstorm a little. Maybe you want to grab a pen and do a little journaling on it. Targets are the first step because that fuels doing these next two things because now you have an intention, you have an aim. I was in a leadership course where they talked about how intention is like 90% of the work. We have to have an aim. We have to have something that we intend to have happen. And then all of a sudden things kind of fall into place. When I meet with someone for the first time and they have a really clear intention about what they want, then it's so easy for them to make the decision, yes or no, to come work with me. Like, yes, your work is going to help me get to that thing, whether that's health, performance, or relationships. Like, what is it? So, targets. Second step, triggers. Noticing what causes us to trigger the stress response. I could also think of this as tensions. What's causing you some mental tension? What keeps you up at night? Like, think about that for a moment. What are some of the worries that go on in your head? What keeps you up at night? When do you feel your body tense up? Like somebody says something, or could just be their tone of voice, and you feel your shoulders go up a little, or your chest tighten here, your belly tighten, or your jaw clenches. Do you grind? Do you need a mouth guard? That's a real clue that you're triggering the stress response and you're in that mode. So the body gives us clues as to whether or not something is causing us to trigger the stress response. And again, our emotions. So anytime you feel angry or annoyed, anxious or afraid, anytime you feel ashamed, and anytime you're about to argue. So what are those things you complain about or argue about? Like those are clues. So those are what I refer to as your triggers. And it puts you like right on the edge to possibly go into fight or flight. And then how do you know you're in fight or flight? Everybody has a different way that fight or flight shows up, that these stress hormones affect them. There are internal things that are the same for all of us. It's going to mess up our digestive system, our reproductive system, our cognitive functioning, like so many just basic things. But how you experience it could be very unique. So I'll give you a couple examples. Some people, it's very head centered, so they get migraines, headaches, jaw tension. Um, they have trouble seeing and hearing, like they just really lose it. Brain fog. Um, brain fog is linked to other things, but it's like, let's see if it's a stress response issue. Oh, you may feel your face turn red or hot. You may flush, even your chest. You feel hot. I've seen clients and others like they'll flush all the way up their arms and legs, like everything will kind of tingle and turn red. That's that blood flow that's pulling fat and glucose into the bloodstream so we can fight or run away. So you'll see those changes. So some people it's head centered, some people it's chest centered. Hard to speak. You may feel or someone else, you may notice with someone else, like their chest actually tightens and now it's hard to breathe. So they're chest breathing. They're just breathing with their chest and not their full abdomen and chest. So you'll see the chest moving up and down. Um, of course, like some people have heart palpitations. They'll feel their heart just kind of going crazy, beating out of their chest. They notice a lot here. And then for some people, it's gut. So they feel nauseous or like a pit in their stomach. They feel empty there too. I've heard clients say that, like, I just feel so empty in my stomach, like I can't explain it. Um, there could be a lot of disease there, like IBS, colitis, ulcers, of course. Ulcers are interesting that at first it was like stress causes ulcers. Like when I was a child, that was the big message for people. And then came out some science that says, no, it's a bacteria that causes ulcers. But here's the deal, and this relates back to what I shared about with Steve Jobs. When we trigger fight or flight and release these hormones, it creates a very acidic body inside. So cancers and bacteria thrive in an acid body, which is why that bacteria in the stomach would thrive and cause the ulcers. So the root cause is the release of these stress hormones. Um, so yeah, so figuring out what are your triggers, then tools and the 10-second solution. And on these shows, these little shows, I give you, just kind of my basic tools. When I coach someone individually, I have over 50 ways to interrupt that stress response. But you have about 10 seconds from a resting heart rate. If your heart rate is elevated, you have less time. But that's still enough time for you to either start one of my tools or use it completely in order to interrupt that stress response so that you don't let those hormones go crazy in your body. It's such a game changer. So noticing the stimulus and then actually making a choice, like making a conscious choice to not go into fight or flight. That is what we do here. And it takes practice. The first thing that has to happen is, like, we need to define those targets, and then we need to figure out what those triggers are. And believe me, I'm 16 years into this and I'm still uncovering triggers, little things, just small things that would cause me to be annoyed. Annoyance is my big A. I like to say, what's your big A? I used to joke with students I was coaching. I said, in my class, you don't want to get A's. That's angry, annoyed, anxious, afraid, ashamed, right? It's like, no, we want to go to the C's and the E's. That's calm, confident, committed, composed, congruent, energized, empowered, enlightened, extraordinary, enthusiastic, expansive. So there's so many things that we can aim for emotionally that can help change this up. So targets, triggers, tools. Those are the 3 steps of pressure free. And like I said, it takes practice because we have years, however old you are, and add 9 months to that because you started triggering when you were inside your mother. So we've been triggering the stress response from the time from before we were even born. And so we have a lot of habits of reaction, but we also generated habits of reaction imitating others. It could have been your parents, your grandparents, your guardians, anyone caring for you, a daycare worker, and a nanny, teachers, coaches, professors, people you emulated, even if you emulated them on TV or a screen, like you pick up habits of reaction from others as you're growing. And because we learn through imitation. So if someone spills something on the floor in the kitchen and there's a reaction and you grew up with that day after day after day, like, you may have that reaction. Notice that if we have something that went on in our birth families, we often make a choice like, oh, I'm never going to do that with my family, right? Or we fall into the pattern unconsciously. We don't realize it. That's some of the things that I'm like fascinated in uncovering, figuring out those triggers. So let's do a reset. We'll do a reset this week on this show. And if you need a real reset, like if you're tired, if you're like, life needs to be better, why is, you ask that question, how is this my life? life needs to be better, then I'm so here for you. Just book a call with me. You can go to my website, L Ingalls, right down in the corner here, lingalls.com. You can also get to that by pressure-free.com. And we can have a conversation, see if working with me would be a good fit. Or for your team, if you have a team that is experiencing a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety, a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of uncertainty going on today. I'm happy to have a call and see if we could put together a team workshop that would be beneficial to you. So have a beautiful pressure-free day. Bye.